Hello and welcome to the video. This is an overview and review of this model here. This is the Rekon FPV Rekon35. It was released last week, but I've been lucky enough to have it in here for a couple of weeks to put it through its paces. Now, a while back, I looked at a model from Rekon FPV that used a single 18650 battery. Lots of other vendors have produced a version of this model. This is the Rekon 3. Now, while it is technically a very capable achievement to get a quad to fly with a single 18650, the flying, in my humble opinion, was a little bit meh. It was great that it could fly, but the compromises to get it flying meant that the throttle response was really mushy, and it actually wasn't a lot of fun to fly. The issue is, even with a decent VT6 class 18650 lithium ion battery, it can't provide the currents that we use and are used to in LiPo land. So to help with this, you can either increase the voltage, so you have two 18650s in series, and that will increase the voltage but reduce the current needed, because the amount of power or watts needed to hover a model remains the same. So if you increase the voltage, you decrease the amp, and that decreases the current that you need to pull out the cells, which ultimately is better if you're going to try and run a quad with lithium ion. So this new Rekon FPV 35 that uses two of these actually makes a lot of sense. But of course, adding another heavy 18650 battery into the mix means you are going to need more power and thrust. And also, this version is available with both analog and DJI HD stuff, as I have it here. With the analog version, the belly of it isn't quite as deep. So the question for me around this Rekon 35 boils down to two or three things. The first is, how is it to fly? Is it better than the Rekon 3 in terms of throttle response and the ability to handle more aggressive maneuvers? How long will it fly with two 3000 mAh VTC6 batteries that I've got here? I've got two new ones specifically for this model. And with all the testing done, who's it really aimed at? So let's find out. So while I unbox this, let's talk about the specs. Now, this is a 3.5-inch 2S long-range quad is how it's being positioned on the Rekon FPV website, and it will comfortably get under the 250 gram limit if that's important to you. It is going to be quite efficient and quiet. It's clear that with that kind of stuff in mind, putting these larger batteries on the model with 3000 mAh to play with, and using 3.5-inch props, that we should get a reasonable amount of flight time. The motors on this are 1303.5 5500 kV motors running 3-inch props, and it also at the back has an M80 GPS. Now, it comes with Betaflight on it, but it does mean with that GPS, if you're flying in a new location, then you don't have to worry about remembering where you're stood in the field, because the distance and direction to home is going to be there. Plus, of course, we have the backup of the Betaflight GPS rescue mode as well. Now, as I take it out, you'll notice there's a big piece of tape here over the quad, and that's to make sure that you don't accidentally install the batteries the wrong way round. If you install things the wrong way around, there isn't any protection for that. It is going to make a mess of your quad, so you need to be super careful. I've got a couple of tips with that. I would get a Sharpie and put the plus and minus actually right on the outside so you don't get it wrong. The other tip that I use is I put a little bit of tape around the negative terminal of the 18650s. That helps you pull them out of the battery holder, but also having it on the negative end means that you don't accidentally get in a situation where you're going to short out the positive tip with the negative case when you pull it out if the insulation's been damaged. Now, this has a Zeus all-in-one 2-6S flight controller running the Zeus F4 Evo target, a Cadix Polar Vista, Rekon 1303.5 kV 5500 brushless motors. Input voltage for those is going to be 2S. M80 GPS at the back. There's also a DC 9-volt power module in here, which is designed to make sure that even if you run those lithium ion batteries down, you're not going to have the whole thing rebooting and lose your FPV and flight controller. Recommended batteries for this are 18650 3000 milliamp hour batteries. I'd personally recommend get your hands on VTC6 or VTC5A cells. The better the cell, the better this is going to fly. So with the adapter included in the box, we can plug it into Betaflight and have a look. So with it connected, we can see there's quite a chunk of stuff in the data flash already. So that means that somebody's on this right left the factory. Let's enable expert mode and just very quickly run through everything. So you can see it's Betaflight 4.2 and there's the Zeus F4 Evo target. So in terms of ports, not a lot in here. We have the MSP configuration on UART1 for the DJI on-screen display. GPS is set for soft serial 1. So I'm guessing we're not going to be able to run iNav on this. Standard quad stuff, motor direction reversed, D-Shot 600, 8K gyro, 4K PID loop frequency. This is all very standard stuff. S-Bus input. There isn't a buzzer on this, so I would probably turn on the beacon stuff. Everything is set pretty much standard. I'm not going to go mad with this. GPS rescue. Dump and diff are down below if you want to have a look, particularly if you want to explore the PID profile settings and the rate profile settings that are set up by default. Only two tabs I will talk about. First one in the modes tab. There isn't a lot set up in here. There's an arming switch setup and then angle and a GPS rescue. So you're probably going to want to connect it and have a play with that so it works in exactly the right way. And the on-screen display, although not a bad layout, I would come here and move things around, particularly for the DJI stuff. So dump and diff again down below if you're interested. In terms of flying, it is an awful lot nicer and more fun to fly than its baby brother, the Rekon 3. It feels like a model powered by a small LiPo rather than two lithium-ion cells. Throttle response is a lot better, hovering at about 35 to 40% without an action camera, so there's enough on here for you to put a skeletonized action camera or something like a Peanut and manage easily. There's no need to think ahead with the height, the same as the Rekon 3, because the throttle response, although it isn't super aggressive, is easily enough to kind of get you out of trouble if you find that you're getting a bit close to that tree, and you can just blip the throttle and easily sail over the top. That's something that the Rekon 3 couldn't do. You had to anticipate 100 yards when you wanted to ascend quickly. Noise levels are okay, louder than expected with a high whine when using the higher throttle in particular. Endurance is excellent with over 12 minutes possible with two good 3000 milliamp hour VTC6 18650 batteries. The tune is good, but you can see from this footage from a windy day, it can be pushed around a bit and you can get a little bit of twitching. On a calm day, it is beautiful, but on a bleak, windy day like the day the footage is from at the moment, it does get pushed around. Camera performance from the DJI kit is as you'd expect, and some nice touches in here to keep the FPV and flight controller pieces running, even if you do push the voltage down below the levels that we'd normally have given up if you're running a LiPo. It isn't a racer, it isn't a freestyle king. This is a great little explorer class for longer flights in a pocket quad. So at the start I asked, how is it to fly? Is it as soft as the Rekon 3? Well, the answer to that is performance is night and day. We're not talking a 4S high-C LiPo-powered flippy-floppy monster, but this is very easy to fly, and you kind of forget that you're running on two 18650 batteries. Hover throttle is good with lots of extra capacity for a lightweight action camera, and speed is good too. I wasn't worried about it falling out of the sky, and I could just relax and have a lot of fun. Noise was a little bit more than expected thanks to the high KV and those three-bladed props. How long will it fly with two 3000 milliamp hour VTC6 batteries? Well, I'm getting around 12, just over 12 minutes, and it really depends on your flying style and the all-up weight, whether or not you have an action camera on there or not. But you can easily manage over 10 minutes even if you're flying aggressively. How well will it fly? The tune, as I mentioned, is lovely on calmer days, but on a windy day like the footage that I showed, it will twitch, so be aware of that. Bigger quad would probably be better when there's a wind blowing. But it does feel very nice and fun to fly and doesn't suffer from the same limitation as its smaller brother in terms of its flying characteristics. Other things to mention, the battery holder isn't a structural part as with the Rekon3, so that's a very different way of putting everything together. This feels an awful lot more rigid. As with all 18650s, watch for correct orientation. No reverse protection on this model, so do not install your 18650s the wrong way around, otherwise very bad things will happen. I again would recommend that you write on the positive and negative side with a metallic Sharpie so that's really clear so you don't forget, and I also put a little bit of tape on my batteries on the negative end just to remind me which end is which. There is a separate flying lead for a separate receiver, so if you're not using the DJI FPV controller, I am here. It's relatively easy and straightforward to install a separate receiver for FreeSky, ELRS, Crossfire Tracer, whatever it is you want to play with. Construction is sturdy, but lots of the electronics and wires are exposed. I'm guessing that's a weight thing, so do check everything after an incident, particularly if it lands in something that's wet or muddy. And the mount for an action camera is on here too. I think a peanut would probably be a good fit, but do make sure that you're keeping in mind that a heavier model will fly for less time. This is a bit of an odd design with a low slung belly. It kind of reminds me of the Razorback from The Mandalorian or Serenity. It's kind of a bit of a weird shape, but to be honest, you're not looking at that when it's flying around. You're looking through the view of the goggles, and it is a very stable, easy way to kind of fit everything in. Again, everything is a little bit exposed, so check stuff if you have a crash. The air unit on mine was on the latest version but not activated, so I did need to plug it in. Be aware of that, and again, use the best 18650 high current packs you can get your hands on. They will help with flight performance and endurance. So in summary, is it a racer? No. Is it a freestyle model? No. Who's it aimed at? Pilots like me, I guess, who are going to really enjoy it. It gives you long flight times, GPS stuff like direction and distance to home, speed and altitude in the on-screen display, as well as the Betaflight GPS recovery in case of a failsafe. It's a small, compact, discreet explorer that's fun to fly and can fly for a long time for this size, making it a great model to keep on hand with your DJI kit for those days where you want to explore. I wasn't a fan of the Rekon3's flight performance thanks to those compromises to make it work with a single 18650. I have no such reservations about the Rekon35. Recommended if you want a pocket HD Explorer that's powered by lithium ion. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.